My mother always says that men shouldn't be kept on too tight a leash, it's easy for things to backfire. So when Timothy openly started keeping a young model as his mistress, I didn't cry or make a scene. I just asked him, will you divorce me for her? He said he wouldn't, and then promptly gave me a villa as compensation. Not long after, the young model discovered she was pregnant. She came to me and said, Gina said she needs me to give her a proper place in order to have the child. We'll temporarily divorce. Once she gives birth, we'll remarry. Later, I waited for a long time. Until he and that woman had their second child. I still never got to hear him say a word about getting back together. But it doesn't matter. At least I'm like him now, with both a son and a daughter. I had just finished making the baby food and was about to feed the children. A long-awaited message suddenly popped up. It was from Timothy, whom I hadn't been in touch with for 3 years. He said, Shayla, come back, let's remarry. See you tomorrow at 8 a.m. The words were cold. Yet, it felt as if I could see him looking down on me, with that contemptuous, dismissive expression, just like when he brought up the divorce 3 years ago. He came home with Gina, who was 3 months pregnant, and casually said to me, Gina insists on having a proper status before she's willing to give birth to the child. We'll get divorced for now. Once she has the baby, we can remarry. He said he couldn't let down both the mother and her child. So, I had to bear with it for a while. I opened my mouth, wanting to ask him why. Why did he abandon our 5-year relationship so easily? But just as I was about to speak, I remembered what my mother had said. She said, when a man has money, his heart can easily wander. But even if he has dozens or hundreds of women outside, as long as you're in his heart, sometimes you can turn a blind eye. I nodded, not refuting his words. I only asked him one question, do you still love me? My question seemed to have caused him trouble. Displeasure flashed in his eyes as he responded in a deep voice, Shayla, we're almost 30. There's no need to be so sentimental, always dwelling on love or not. At that moment, I felt like I had gotten the answer I wanted. And yet, I hadn't. I didn't say another word. I tidied up my luggage efficiently, making room for the new mistress of the house. The next day, we made an appointment to go through the divorce procedures. The moment we walked out with the divorce certificate, he gifted me a brand new sports car. His expression was sharp, carrying a warning. Shayla, behave yourself in the days to come. Don't cause trouble for Gina. Once she gives birth, I'll get in touch with you about remarrying. But if you don't behave, don't even think about remarrying. Not far away, my mother's gaze was fixed tightly on us. The words I wanted to say were stuck in my throat. I nodded stiffly and replied, all right, I'll be good and wait for you to contact me. But what I really wanted to say was, please don't contact me again. Let's just part ways here. But I didn't dare. I knew all too well that if I said that, as soon as I got back home, my mother would start crying, making a scene, and threatening to take her own life. Just like on the night before my divorce, she wept bitterly while hitting me and yelling, why is my fate so bitter? I finally helped you marry into a good family, and you don't even know how to keep a man's heart. How could I have given birth to such a useless thing? Now, having gotten the answer they wanted, satisfied expressions spread across their faces. As Timothy was about to get in the car and leave, my mom hurried over from the side of the road and handed him an exquisitely wrapped gift box. Using a flattering tone, she said, son-in-law, these are eggs from my own free-range chickens, perfect for nourishing a pregnant woman. Take them back for her to eat, and hopefully, she'll give birth to a healthy, chubby baby boy. Timothy didn't say a word but gave me a meaningful look, filled with sarcasm and disdain. My face flushed with shame, and I instinctively reached for her hand, trying to stop her from saying more. However, she shook off my hand in annoyance and loudly exclaimed, what are you doing? If she gives birth to a healthy baby boy, you'll benefit from it too. Once you two reconcile in the future, that child will still be your son. What's wrong with me being good to my grandson? Until now. I have never been able to forget what she said. Timothy looked at me meaningfully as he left and said, "Shayla, sometimes you should really learn from your mom. Be more generous and open-minded." After listening to his words, I resold the sports car and villa he gave me. Part of the money was used to buy a 3-bedroom apartment and a practical car suitable for a woman. Another part was invested in various ventures. But sometimes, when I see other families living happily, I can't help but feel envious. So, without telling anyone, I traveled abroad alone and gave birth to 2 twins, a boy and a girl, who share my bloodline. At this moment, as I watch my 2 precious children quietly eating their meal, I put down my phone and chose not to reply to his message. I thought that by doing so, he would know that I currently have no intention of remarrying him. Unexpectedly, not long after, my mom, as if she had won the lottery, rushed excitedly to my house. As soon as she arrived, she started rummaging around casually. She didn't forget to ask me, "You and your ex-husband are getting remarried tomorrow, why aren't you hurrying to look for the certificates? Find them for me right away." Hearing this, I suddenly realized. Timothy not only told me about the remarriage, but he also told my mom. I didn't move. Looking at her calmly, I asked, "Mom, when he mentioned the idea of remarrying to you, did you tell him I have 2 children?" My mother paused in her search for the documents. She turned to look at us, scoffed as she rolled her eyes, and pointed at my children, saying, "They're just fatherless bastards anyway. Might as well give them away for adoption. You don't actually think you could marry Timothy while still dragging these 2 along with you, do you?" Back when I went abroad for a year and came back with 2 children, she was so furious that she resorted to crying, making a scene, and even threatening suicide. She was terrified Timothy would find out about it and no longer want me, insisting I give the children away. I didn't listen and quietly cut off her living expenses for 2 months. Only then did she settle down. But I never expected. Until now. She still hasn't given up on the idea of sending my child away. Looking at my mother, who is full of longing for a wealthy future life and yet speaks ill of my child, I sigh softly and take a photo of my child with my phone. I send it to Timothy right in front of her and say, "I have 2 children now. Can you accept that?" Timothy replies quickly, but with just a question mark. My mother saw this scene, her eyes nearly bursting with rage. She kept shouting that I was crazy, that I had personally cut off my own path to wealth and status. Without paying attention, I put down my phone and tried to continue feeding. Timothy, however, replied to the message at that moment. "Shayla, are you mocking me for having 2 children? Didn't your mother already say that my children are your children? Do you have to send such a photo just to upset me?" Before I could reply, Timothy suddenly called me. I didn't want to answer, but my mother beat me to it and picked up the phone. Her expression instantly changed, and she spoke in a deliberately soft voice, "Oh, son-in-law, it's me." Before she could finish speaking, the phone was handed over, and a childish voice came through from the other end. "You bad woman. My dad won't marry you. We have our own mom, and I don't want you to be our mom. You're not allowed to come to our house. That's right, none of us welcome you. If you dare come, I'll beat you so hard you'll be looking for your teeth all over the ground." Along with their voices came another one, filled with helpless fondness. "Don't make a fuss, little ones. Aunt Shayla is very nice, she will treat you like her own children." Timothy's steady, husky voice came through the phone. Hearing the long unheard voice, I involuntarily shuddered all over. Suddenly I remembered the day my father cheated, bringing the mistress to the house to cause a scene, trying to take away valuable items before leaving. My mother, frightened by his fierce and terrifying demeanor, trembled all over and said timidly, "Her son wanted to attend a prestigious elementary school before, and I gave you all the money as you asked. I really have no money left." She said that before. I never knew she gave money to the mistress's son for his education. I was so angry I trembled all over, yet I was afraid she might get hurt by my father, so I kept shielding her with my body. That day, my father never believed that my mother had no more money. He brandished a knife, yelling that he would kill us. But at the critical moment, my mother pushed me behind her and shielded me tightly. Timothy also arrived promptly with bodyguards. They restrained my father, who had fallen into madness. Timothy used his family's influence to gather various pieces of evidence, resulting in my father being sentenced to a full 8 years. The night we learned he would face prison time, Timothy, fearing I might overthink, came especially to my house to keep me company. Seeing me silently shed tears as I looked at the judgment, he held me protectively in his arms, full of concern, and gently comforted me. "Shayla, don't be afraid. I'm here, and I will never let anyone bully you again. From now on, I will always protect you." My mother also cried, sobbing as she said, "Shayla, your dad has been locked up, and I only have you now. Considering that I stood up to protect you, will you promise to listen to me from now on?" Her words completely stifled the questions that were on the tip of my tongue. At that moment, I really wanted to ask her why she had given money to her mistress's son, why she had lied to me about the family having no money, and why she only gave me $100 for living expenses each month. But I knew all too clearly that the matter was already over. No matter what answer I might get, what was lost could never be recovered. I was even naive enough to think that in the future, with Timothy by my side, he would be my strong support, helping me heal the broken parts of my heart. But I never expected that, following my mother's advice to not interfere in his personal life and give him freedom, I would ultimately face the sharp blade he ruthlessly turned against me. At this moment, hearing Timothy's patient voice soothing the child nearby, I suddenly felt a wave of exhaustion and said calmly, "Timothy, I'm not joking with you. I really do have 2 children. And also, taking care of 2 children already takes up all my time. I don't have the energy to work as a nanny for your child," I replied calmly and honestly. My mother, however, got so angry that she was almost breathing fire. Just as she was about to speak again, I reminded her, "Mom, I recall it's almost time for your beauty salon to pay the fees again, isn't it? If you still can't distinguish right from wrong, I don't mind bearing the blame for being unfilial once more." She fell silent and didn't dare say another word, only glaring at me with a look of disappointment and frustration. On the phone, Timothy sneered dismissively. "Shayla, what kind of joke are you making? Don't forget the diagnosis the doctor gave you when we got married: you can't have children. My test report showed no issues. The problem was with him. He has oligospermia." When I received the test results, I lied and told him the issue was with me, just to protect his pride. Throughout the years of our marriage, I secretly helped him improve his health, all in the hope of having a lovely, well-behaved baby together. Later he came back with that woman. He said he wanted a temporary divorce from me to give her a proper status. I had originally intended to tell him that his body had issues, that he couldn't have children. But then I remembered what he and my mother had said. They both told me that I just needed to be a good Mrs. Timothy and not meddle in things that weren't my concern. So I let go of that thought. I don't know what came to his mind, but he softened his tone and said gently, "All right, Shayla, I know you've been waiting for our remarriage. Making you wait 3 years was my mistake. Once we go and get our marriage certificate, I promise you, we'll have a grand wedding just like before. No matter how lively, it can never go back to how it was before." I didn't respond and hung up the phone directly. "Shayla, why are you so ungrateful? Do you know how many people are eyeing Mrs. Timothy's position?" My mother, disappointed in me, scolded me harshly. I raised my eyes coldly, staring straight at her without blinking. I replied calmly, "Mom, since you're so bored you can't sit still, why don't you go out and get a job yourself?" I canceled the family payment right in front of her. My mother immediately panicked and hurriedly promised me that she would never interfere in my affairs again. I didn't take this matter to heart. I didn't show up for the appointment the next day either. Timothy called me several times, but I didn't answer. Perhaps he felt his pride was hurt. After a few attempts, he stopped calling. It wasn't until a week later. I had just finished my postpartum yoga session when I spotted Timothy and Gina entangled in a heated argument on the street. Gina was dressed in a simple t-shirt and jeans. Half of her ponytail had come loose, covering part of her face, which was worn and weary, marked by the passage of time. "Timothy, are you really determined to divorce me just so you can remarry that bitch Shayla? Don't forget, I've borne you a son and a daughter. How can you just abandon me like this?" Timothy faced her accusations with a look of impatience, angrily shaking off her hand. His eyes were filled with disgust as he looked at her. "Enough. Look at yourself now. What's the difference between you and a madwoman? Besides, Shayla and I are genuinely in love. If it weren't for you shamelessly climbing into my bed back then and getting pregnant with my child, how could I have ever divorced her to marry you? Timothy. Do you really think that by divorcing me, you can remarry Shayla? Let me tell you, no woman will ever accept a man who betrayed her again. Do you think you're some golden treasure that she can't live without?" These words deeply hurt Timothy's heart. He had also noticed this. I was no longer as obedient to him as I had been before. That day, he waited from 8 in the morning until 8 at night, a full 12 hours. He never caught a glimpse of me. He wanted to come find me but couldn't bear to swallow his pride. You wretched woman." Timothy, angered and humiliated, roughly pushed away Gina, who was holding his arm. Just as he was about to slap her, his peripheral vision caught sight of me. In an instant, a clear flicker of awe and the joy of having found what was lost flashed in his eyes. Timothy lowered his raised hand. Just like when he was young. Whenever he saw me, he would carefully straighten his clothes, facing me with his best posture. Then, he jogged toward me with a smile. "Shayla, long time no see. Are you here to see me?" His voice trembled with excitement as he spoke. Compared to his joy, I felt utterly indifferent. Indeed, it has been quite a while. He thought I was blaming him for not contacting me in the past 3 years and quickly explained, "Shayla, I wanted to come see you earlier, but..." He again noticed Gina standing still and glaring at me fiercely. He gritted his teeth and said, "It's all because of this woman. Only a year after giving birth, she drugged me and got pregnant again, which is why I couldn't come to you in time. Shayla. I've divorced her now. Please come back, I miss you so much." In his gaze toward me, there was no longer the contempt and disgust from 3 years ago. Instead, it held the fervent affection of our younger years. Upon seeing this, Gina's eyes flared with undisguised malice. She strode over to us and sneered, "Shayla, how desperate for marriage are you? You've been pining after someone else's husband for a whole 3 years. Don't you know we have a son and a daughter, and the kids can already talk? Or maybe, since you can't have kids of your own, you just enjoy playing stepmother to someone else's children? Shut your mouth." Before I could say anything, a faint anger appeared on Timothy's face as he snapped at her. "You're the one who ruined our relationship, the third wheel. What right do you have to say that about her? If we're talking about shamelessness, who can top you?" Gina's face turned pale and flushed from his words. And I glanced at him indifferently. 3 years ago, when he told me he wanted a divorce, he was tightly embracing Gina, shielding her behind him, afraid that I might harm her. Even when Gina tearfully said she was willing to abort the child and leave, he held her nervously, gently soothing her emotions. He told her, "I want both you and the child. With me here, no one will harm you. I will divorce her and give you a happy home." His words to her and to me were completely different. He told me that once the child was born, he would remarry me. But to her, he said, "I will give you a happy home." His heart. Vast yet small. Small yet vast. It can hold 2 people at once, but it cannot wholeheartedly love one person. All right, stop arguing. My child is waiting for me at home, so I won't stick around. I calmly took a step back, preparing to leave after finishing my words. Timothy, hearing this, thought I was just making an excuse to go. He actually said to me with a smile, "Then I'll go back with you, so I can see the so-called child of yours." He emphasized the word child quite strongly, with a hint of mockery. I couldn't understand. Are my words really so untrustworthy? I looked at him and said calmly, "My child is shy and doesn't like strangers. Maybe next time when you're free." Shayla, stop it. I know you don't have any child. I also know you're upset about my 2 children, but rest assured, I've already made it clear to them, from now on, you'll be their only mother. Timothy said to me in a negotiating tone, if you feel that you haven't raised them and can't form an emotional bond, we can adopt a newborn baby instead. We can treat her as if she were our own and raise her from infancy. Upon hearing this, I couldn't help but laugh out loud. I have my own biological child that I'm not raising. Why on earth would I need to raise someone else's child? I opened my mouth to speak, but just then, a store clerk from the nearby maternity and baby shop came out to take out the trash. Upon spotting me, her eyes lit up, and she hurried over. Miss Shayla, will DeBeo and Xiaobao be coming for swimming this weekend? We'd like to make preparations in advance. Yes, I might be a bit busy, so I'll have my friend bring the 2 little ones over. I smiled faintly, responding to her. Timothy's face, however, turned pale, looking at me with disbelief. What do you mean, DeBeo and Xiaobao? The clerk looked puzzled and said, Miss Shayla's children, a son and a daughter, both incredibly adorable. I've never seen such cute little ones before. Her words struck him like a bolt of thunder from the sky. Timothy trembled, unable to believe it. You really have a child? How old? Is it mine? He asked several questions in a row. His voice grew more and more shaky, filled with unmistakable excitement. It seemed he believed I was already pregnant with his child at the time of our divorce. Hearing this, the shop assistant's confusion deepened in her eyes. If I don't explain this clearly, people might gossip behind my back. Although I don't care what others say, my child must not face any injustice. We've been divorced for 3 years. My child is only 2 years old, how could they possibly be yours? I spoke with a very calm expression, almost carelessly. The hope on Timothy's face froze abruptly after I finished speaking. How is that possible? You promised you would wait for me faithfully. Gina seemed to have heard something amusing and couldn't wait to speak up. See, Timothy? I told you she's no good woman. There's no way she'd obediently wait for you to bring up the topic of remarriage. And now, look, she's already had a child with someone else. Shut up. Timothy's smile completely vanished from his face, his eyes filled with helpless resentment. He grabbed my hand with reddened eyes and asked tremblingly, Shayla, this isn't true, right? You said you'd wait for me. I did say that. But it was out of necessity. In the past, I always longed for the day my mom would come to her senses. I hoped she could learn to love me like other mothers do. After Timothy and I got divorced, the most frequent question she asked me was, has your ex-husband reached out to you? Did he mention when you two might reconcile? Don't just waste away at home. Go and make your presence known to him, or he'll forget you exist. What will you do then? Back then, I asked her. In your view, is it impossible to live without a man? I think, on my own, I can also provide her with a happy life. Yet she has never been satisfied. In response to my words, she looked utterly speechless. She retorted, having a man means having a complete family. If you guys hadn't sent your dad to prison, why would I have to endure being called a living widow? At that moment, I realized she had been blaming me all along. Blaming me for not signing the letter of forgiveness and insisting that my father be locked up. It was also because of her words that I finally woke up. Whether it's familial love or romantic love, if you can't have it, then you might as well give it up. Seeing me remain silent, Timothy broke down and shouted hysterically. Say something. When I brought Gina home, didn't you say you were okay with her presence? You promised so clearly, so why are you going back on your word now? Or is this just some way for you to get back at me? I did mind. It was when I first discovered Timothy flirting with someone else on his phone. I cried, I made a scene, I just couldn't understand it. Why would someone who said they loved me just yesterday, today be able to discuss with someone else where to get a room, completely unfazed? That time I went crazy, smashing everything in the living room. I thought my intense display of dissatisfaction would earn his guilt and remorse. However, the look in his eyes was filled with impatience and disgust. It was as if he was looking at a madwoman causing a scene on the street. He asked me, "Shayla, are you done making a scene?" I screamed hysterically in response, "No." Not long after, he called my mom, asking her to come and reason with me. She rushed over upon hearing the news, and when she saw me standing there trembling like a madwoman, she slapped me across the face without a word. She scolded angrily, "Shayla, have you lost your mind? Do you still want to live this life or not? Timothy just made a mistake that any man could make. Why can't you forgive him? Why do you have to keep dwelling on it?" Looking at the two of them standing together, I felt the stinging pain on my face, and my overwhelmed emotions gradually began to settle. I said to him, "We're getting a divorce." Before Timothy could say anything, my mom started slapping herself in a self-harming manner. She cried and yelled, "If you dare to divorce, I'll die and make you watch." He knew that no matter what happened, my mom would always take his side. Later on, when similar things happened again, he would always bring my mom out to suppress me. Even on the day he brought Gina home, he called my mom over, fearing I might cause another scene. So now, faced with his questioning, I tilt my head slightly and ask, "Why did I agree? Aren't you clear about it?" Timothy was left speechless by my words, a flicker of guilt flashing in his grief-stricken eyes. "Shayla, I did this only because I didn't want to truly separate from you." He urgently defended himself. "If Mom hadn't come to our house that day, would you have spoken to me properly? In that situation, we would only have hurt each other, unknowingly damaging our relationship. It's laughable. Even I can't remember. When did we start? We went from sharing everything to being unable to say a single word to each other. And in such a situation, he's still afraid of damaging our relationship. Timothy, don't you find what you're saying ridiculous?" "Shayla, really?" I hadn't finished speaking when my phone suddenly rang. It was the nanny at home calling. She said the child had woken up and was crying for their mother. Hearing the crying from the other end of the phone, my heart tightened abruptly, and I felt an urgent need to go home. "My child is awake. I don't have time to listen to your excuses, Timothy. Let's end it here. Don't come looking for me." With that, I turned and left without looking back. Timothy tried to follow, but Gina stopped him just in time. She shouted angrily, "She already has children and a family, and you're still fantasizing about her leaving her husband and children to be with you? Timothy, don't be so naive." I didn't hear the rest of the words. My heart and mind were completely focused on my child waiting for me at home. In the evening, after washing up, I lay in bed and told my baby a bedtime story. Gina, for no apparent reason, sent me a video of her child. Immediately, a bad feeling arose within me, and I instinctively clicked it open. Yet I saw two children dressed in thin clothes, kneeling before the house door, crying and begging. "Auntie, please don't take my dad away. Both my mom and I really need him." "That's right, Auntie. Please stop looking for my dad. My brother and I can't be without him." They cried while kneeling and kowtowing, their foreheads already bruised with faint bruises. Seeing this scene, my heart tightened abruptly. Gina did this simply to evoke empathy from me, also a mother. However, children should not be used as tools in the fight for affection. Moreover, I have long since given up on Timothy and have absolutely no intention of reconciling with him. Just as I was contemplating what to do, Gina sent me another message. She said, "Shayla, as a mother yourself, you should know how to make choices for your child. If you want your child to bear the label of being a side chick's child, you can choose to ignore my message." Her words were a blatant threat. I couldn't help but laugh in anger and immediately forwarded the video and message screenshots she sent to Timothy. I added, "Keep your wife and children in check. I don't want the same thing to happen again." Timothy replied quickly. He seemed somewhat anxious. He sent a voice message. "I'm sorry, Shayla. I didn't expect her to send you those messages. I'll handle it. Please don't take it to heart. Shayla, my mom told me about your situation, that your children were conceived through IVF and they don't have a father. I'm willing to take on the responsibility of being their dad and to look after all of you. I hope you'll give this serious thought and allow me a chance to make things right." Hearing the voice message he sent, my hands trembled with anger. I had clearly told my mom to stop interfering in our affairs. Yet, she still refused to let it go. I didn't reply to his message. Instead, I immediately canceled all the memberships my mom had set up in various places and froze every bank card in her possession. Over the past 3 years, I have earned a considerable amount from my investments. I will give her 1/3 of that money, simply to get her to settle down and live out the rest of her days in peace. But now, since she refuses to live a peaceful life, there's no need for one anymore. After handling this matter, I transferred half of my assets into my children's names. This agreement will only take effect after they come of age, serving as a safety net I'm leaving for them. When my mother found out her bank card had been frozen, she stormed over to confront me in a fury. "Shayla, what do you mean by this? Are you trying to abandon your own mother? After all I've done raising you, day and night, if I'd known this would happen, I never should have brought you into this world." I listened to her accusations, feeling completely unmoved inside. I took out the long-prepared severance letter and bank card. I told her, "As long as you sign this agreement, I will give you 1 million. As I spoke, the anger on her face grew even more intense. Just as she was about to erupt, I continued, "Alternatively, you can choose to sue me. I will provide you with a fixed monthly support payment as required by law. Other than that, I won't give you a single cent, and I won't be responsible for your life anymore." At these words, my mother froze in place. She never expected that one day I would be so resolute. She trembled as she asked, "Shayla, are you serious? You really don't want your mother anymore? She was the one who abandoned me first." I looked indifferent, showing her no trace of respect, and asked in return, "Have you ever wanted me? When you belittled me in front of Timothy, did you ever think that I was your daughter? When you resented my children and wanted to send them away, did you ever think that they were your grandchildren?" She could be exceptionally forgiving toward the children born to the mistress, yet she couldn't even give my children a smile. My words left her speechless, and for a while, she couldn't utter a complete sentence. "Sign it. 1 million is enough for you to live on for the rest of your days." "No. Shayla, everything can be discussed. I am your biological mother, the one who gave birth to and raised you. You can't treat me like this. I know I was wrong. I will never side with outsiders again, and I won't interfere in your private matters anymore. And I will also help you take care of the child." I had heard these words more than once before. I shook my head and said, "Mom, you only have these 2 choices." In the end, she chose between living the rest of her life in poverty or in abundance, and opted for the latter. As she left with the money, tears welled up in the corners of her eyes. Trembling, she said, "Shayla, it's not that I'm insisting on taking your money. It's just that I need to secure my own future. If you ever need anything in the future, remember to come to me. I will do whatever I can for you." In the end, she still liked to make empty promises to me, saying all sorts of impractical things. I didn't pay any attention and simply let it go. After Timothy found out about this, he realized he no longer had any support to rely on. Silently, he bought some diapers and baby formula and came to see me. Seeing him show up with bags full of supplies, I couldn't help but frown. "What are you doing here?" "Shayla, I've never met your children. These are the kinds of things my own kids usually use, so I'm not sure if they're suitable for yours. Take a look, and if they aren't right, I'll go buy something else." He frantically showed me the things in his hands, and fearing I wouldn't accept them, he quickly added, "These are for the child, it's a token of my regard. Even if you don't want them, you should think about the child. If my child needs anything, I'll buy it myself. I don't need your things, please take them away." My tone was calm yet distant. Timothy, however, acted as though he didn't hear me, eagerly handing over a crudely packaged food bag. He continued, as if to himself, these are the mung bean cakes you loved so much in high school. Even after all these years, the shopkeeper is still the same, and the taste hasn't changed. Give them a try. The boss selling mung bean cakes hasn't changed, and the taste of the mung bean cakes hasn't changed either. But we have long since changed. I didn't take it, looking at him calmly and saying, you know I signed the family severance agreement with my mom, right? I can even give up my own mother, who shares blood ties with me. What makes you think I can't live without you? It was him who gave me hope, and it was him who brought me despair. How can he think he can so easily gain my forgiveness? After saying this, a mischievous thought popped into my mind again. I continued, last time, you said there was something wrong with my body, that I couldn't have children. But I was abroad and succeeded with just one try at in vitro fertilization. Guess why? Timothy, is it possible that your precious child is the retribution for your betrayal of our marriage, your betrayal of me? I've never been a good person. When I first discovered his affair, I had malicious thoughts. I thought he would get the retribution he deserved. That everything he desired would forever slip through his fingers. With just one sentence, I woke Timothy up. He widened his eyes in disbelief, took a step back, and muttered in a daze, impossible. What you said can't be true. Those 2 children, they should be mine. If you don't believe it, you can go get a checkup, to see if there are any issues with you. With that, I had nothing more to say. I closed the door without sparing him another glance. Not long after, news spread that Timothy had taken the 2 children to the hospital for genetic testing. The results showed that they truly had no blood relation at all. Timothy went mad looking for Gina to settle the score. Gina tried to run away after learning about the matter but was promptly subdued by Timothy's men. At that moment, Timothy, filled with hostility, walked into the room where Gina was being held, clutching the test report. You despicable woman, what do you have to say for yourself? He angrily threw the report at her face. Seeing no escape, Gina simply let everything go and smirked at him dismissively. Explanation? What do I need to explain? From start to finish, I only told you I was pregnant. I never said the child was yours. You were the one who assumed it yourself. What does that have to do with me? Timothy was filled with a dark, sinister aura as he tightly gripped her neck, gnashing his teeth and saying, you despicable woman. If you hadn't climbed into my bed back then and shown me that ultrasound report, how could I have ever thought that bastard was mine? The thought of him divorcing me because of someone like this made the fury inside me surge uncontrollably. I kept increasing the pressure in my hands. Gina's lips soon turned deathly pale. The severe lack of oxygen began to turn her complexion ashen gray. The 2 children, hearing the noise from the room, both ran over. Seeing the scene before them, they burst into tears and rushed over, trying to push Timothy away. Daddy, let go of Mommy, don't hit Mommy. In the past, Timothy would grant their every wish, because he believed these were hard-won children. But who could have imagined that the children he had cherished for 3 years were not his own? Get away, all of you. His eyes were bloodshot as he mercilessly kicked away the 2 children who were kneeling on the ground, crying and begging him. You 2 bastards, you don't even deserve to call me Dad, shut up. Gina watched in agony as her children were kicked aside, whimpering in pain, her heart aching. Timothy, take your anger out on me, don't hurt my children. With that, she shouted to her daughter who was trembling in the corner, scared, honey, call Daddy Ryan. Tell him Timothy has gone crazy and is going to kill us. Hearing this, an absurd thought flashed through Timothy's mind. Trembling, he asked, these 2 brats, are they Ryan's? Ryan was his best friend. Ever since he returned to the company and started his role, he had brought Ryan on as his special assistant. But he never expected such an absurd thing to happen. Yes, so what? You're already an incomplete man. Did you really think I'd stay faithful to you? Keep dreaming. That night, Timothy went mad. Everyone in the household, including Ryan who rushed over after receiving a call, was not spared. When the police arrived after receiving his call to turn himself in, Timothy was sitting at the doorstep, covered in blood and looking utterly disheveled. In response to the police's questioning, he replied hoarsely, "Wait for my lawyer to arrive." "I'll go with you then. Please give me a few more minutes." A few days later, an unfamiliar lawyer came knocking. He said, on the day Timothy turned himself in, he drafted a contract for the transfer of equity, handing over everything he owned to you. He said this is what he owed you. He also asked me to tell you he's sorry. Timothy's behavior was despicable. Once he's in, there's no chance of coming back out. The agreement he drafted. Not only does it represent a share transfer agreement, it also serves as a will. Taking the agreement, I thanked the lawyer. Turning my head, I looked not far away at the stroller in front of the nanny. The two little ones were smiling sweetly at me. It felt as if a beautiful life was waving to me. I put away the contract, smiled softly, and walked toward them. "Let's go, my darlings, time to head home."